there's always there's always another time. I feel once you're part of the MMT community, it's like it's really hard to not be part of it anymore. I suppose, I don't know. It's like it's such a interesting thing that I've never actually witnessed before. Yeah, last year was my first year, so.
Oh, cool. That's a long flight for you to take that risk.
Well, I've been following Jason for a while. Like I've actually listened to some of Jason's stuff before, when I was a entrepreneur, and things did well, and then his new show came out, and I met him at a Taki event actually. So when I was in the States, and that's how I got to connect with him. And Taki Moore, who's also actually part of MMT, he kind of said, "Hey, you guys have stuff in common. He doesn't like scaling. You don't like scaling. You should you should chat." So
yeah, we Jason and I talked about that. I was in Toronto in February, and Jason and I talked at length about that. And literally, like, what I told him is that you say you don't like scaling, and I think I'm the only person that actually like lives that. He's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, I go to MMT every year, and I talk to people. And they're like, 'What do you do?' And I'm like, I write books and I travel out and speak." And they go, "Oh, and what else?" And I go, "No, that's it." And I'm like, "Oh, you don't have a no? Oh, well, you should totally. No, I shouldn't. Nope."
So talk to me about that. So here's the thing. Like, I mean, my interviews are very fluid. Like, I just have the conversation, and the team takes all the good stuff out, all the good stuff, keep the good stuff in, take all the bad stuff out, I suppose. The other way around. And right now I'm riffing on like entrepreneurship, like the other side, the side that people don't talk about. The side that, like social media has like made big, all the successes, but no one talks about. Well, they talk, but they don't really talk about what happens inside the head of an entrepreneur. So I've been talking about that. I'm keen to explore a whole bunch of stuff, including friend of a friend. That's such a cool concept. So yeah.
No, I mean, whatever's good for you. I'm trying to think of a polite word that is still strong. I have an aversion to a lot of those social media success sort of type people. Like I fully plan on giving Dan Martell crap about his McLaren when he came, not because he can't own one. I'm not, you buy whatever you want, but like, you can't, as soon as you post it, you're now in that bucket, and you don't want to be in that bucket. You think like you don't want to be in that bucket. You don't want to be in the. I mean, there's a guy. I don't know if you saw. I don't remember if we're connected on Facebook or not. We should be. I posted this on my personal Facebook, so not a lot of people see it. But there's a guy who runs around our town who has a green Lamborghini with the words Lambro across like the top of the windshield. And which is lame enough, but then the words are laid out in such that they make up the colors of the Mexican flag, right? Which is this whole other thing. And then when I posted it on Facebook and was like, okay, local for who is this person? Because he is now the douchiest person I have ever met. Turns out the guy's last name is Currington. He's Irish. But he has Lambro in the, and again, it's like I started tracking him down. You can look him up on YouTube. It's total douche. But he's playing to that model. And it drives me nuts, right? Because like entrepreneurship is not complex. It's hard, but it's simple, right? I mean, it's pretty simple. Figure out something that people want and how to give it to them at a cost they're willing to pay for that's less than what you need to make. But that's it. That's the whole thing. It just takes a whole lot of work to work that formula. And taking pictures in front of supercars has nothing to do with that formula, right?
But it's crazy though, David. Like it's become a thing. Like it's become a thing to the point that like I get a lot of shit for forgetting to take the selfie. Like I hang out with some really, really cool people, but I'm not trained mentally to remember to take the selfie, or even if I do take the selfie, I don't know what to do with the selfie, right?
Well, so that's the thing. You don't have to take it, because if you wouldn't know. And you know what you're doing in that moment that's way more important than taking the selfie? You're being in that moment. You're focused on having a conversation with that person. Like, again, not to drag friend of a friend into it, but in a book on relationships and networking, that's the biggest thing, is that, I mean, there's a broader problem too that we could speak to, which is this idea that social in general, not even just the Lamborghini entrepreneurship porn side, but just social in general, is not a solid replacement for those relationships, right? So the fact that you're going to like take the selfie and then maybe 6 months later it shows up as a Facebook memory, and then you go, oh guys, remember this? And like that doesn't count as a real interaction. We think it does because it releases the same little chemicals in our brain, but over time, that's not a relationship. Making the time to be in the moment and learn, even if you learn like one extra little thing about somebody because you didn't take that time to get perfectly posed out and snap a shot, you've deepened that relationship way more than proof of having the photo, right? So there's that whole thing too. Yeah.
So it's really interesting, right? How the word entrepreneurship has different meanings, and I suppose it's the word successful we're talking right now about what seems like success, right? It's like it seems successful if I'm taking these pictures with these kind of people, or it seems successful if whatever. And then it becomes really unfortunate for the ones that, put their life work into, putting out a book or putting out like a new podcast episode, and you go, I actually really want people to listen to this, but do I fall into the same category? Or is it like how do you like put your voice out there or put your work out there without falling into that category of being like a fucking lame ass jackass?
How do you promote your work without promoting yourself, in essence, right? I mean, I think it comes down to, and I hate to say this because then all the Lambros of the world are just gonna start using testimonials the way they use their personal things. But it comes down to that sort of help piece. Like I've spent 6 years now writing and speaking and generating all of my income sort of from book deals and sales, and then from being invited to go give talks or workshops somewhere. And I never made one of those sort of like sizzle reels until about a week ago. Right. And the reason we made it had nothing to do with, look at how awesome I am, here's my highlight reel. The reason we made it is that we started to have a really hard time explaining the process that I use to get ready for a talk with an organization, which is different than your average sort of, I'm going to show up and I've got a presentation in a can and you're going to love it. Right. I want to go a little bit deeper and what are your needs and this and that. And then I'm going to go look at this whole like pile of human behavior research and pull out 2 or 3 things and then build something from there. And explaining that to people, like we were losing business because we were struggling to find a way to explain to people that that's actually better than what these other things are. So we basically took the tool that they were using, but framed it not as, look at how amazing I am and look at all of these places that I mean, there's a little clip of me on CBS this morning just because, why wouldn't you use that clip? But it's not full of that, here's my awesome testimonials and highlight reels and whatever. It's, here's how we're going to help you. Right. And this is what we do and what makes it different in a way that's going to help you. And I think that's how you promote yourself without feeling self-promotional, is you promote the help that your work provides, right? Like you go on my website, the very first thing it even says is, how can I help you? And then there's 3 buttons, and depending on which one you click, we're going to steer you towards resources that help you with that. We're not looking to like do an email conversion with a tripwire for $7 and then upsell you a course on the whatever. We're not looking to do that. We're just like, we're here to help you. And if we give you good stuff, you'll come back. And the problem with that is that like, this is the thing, the reason I think a lot of entrepreneurs can fall into that trap is that self-promotion is great at if you're optimizing for a conversion, right? I'm optimizing for a fan base, and it's a different thing. Like I don't optimize for conversion. I'm optimizing for community. What I don't want is somebody to open up, to type in their Visa information one time and send me $200 so that I can make my Lambo payment, right? What I want is for somebody who reads one of my books or hears me give a talk, goes back and buys the whole backlist and ends up chatting with me on Twitter or on LinkedIn about the concepts. And then other people who are familiar with my work chime in, and now we're having this long conversation. Like That's my version of scaling, right? For a lot of other people, scaling is just, oh, well, I know if I spend $50 on Facebook ads, I'll make $100. So I'll take that all the way to the bank. That's optimizing for conversion. I want to optimize for community.
I love that distinction. It's such a beautiful distinction because, I mean, I suppose the kinds of clients that we get, like an Amplify, that come here and kind of go, well, can you help us put a voice to our brand? There are two types of people. They're the ones that kind of go, if there's no ROI or you can't explain to me where the ROI is, I won't do this. And then there's the other kind of people who go, I want to create this beautiful piece of work, but I can't sell anything because I'll be selling my soul. And it's just like this. I think it's a distinction in your head as well, in our heads, where if we sell, we feel like snake oil salesman type, I suppose. And I wonder whether that takes away from all the effort that we take into actually doing our craft, right? And that's what you're talking about with the reel. You're actually talking about how you do your craft differently to anyone else who would just kind of open Keynote and, I suppose, put a few slides in.
Right. And by the way, like, we're still probably going to lose a greater percentage of the business than your average sort of motivational speaker. I'm fine with that, because those motivational speakers are optimizing for conversions. They're just trying to get you to sign on the dotted line so they can come. And if you're disappointed at the end, who cares? You already paid your fee. And I mean, not everybody is this way, but a lot of people are. And it's that churn. As soon as you start talking about cost per conversion and churn rates and that sort of thing, you're not thinking about building a community. You're thinking about how much investment do I have to put in to make hopefully a number that's higher than that, and that will lead you down a path where all of the metrics you pay attention to are per conversion. I mean, this is what you're struggling with your agency too, is convincing people that, like, look, I can't show you an ROI. And by the way, once I show it to you, you now get obsessed with making that formula work and cranking that whatever number you got to put in. Now you've got all the dials adjusted, and now you're going to put in bigger numbers to get bigger numbers out the other side. And now you're not taking care of people. Now you're just running a machine. And that's great if that's what you want to do. But like, that's not interesting to me. For one thing, I don't want to deal with the amount of customer service you would have to deal with by having that many disappointed customers, right? Like, what I love about my life, right, is occasionally somebody will say, hey, I read your book and I didn't like it for this and this and this and this reason. And I go, well, hopefully 30 days hasn't passed by and you can send it back to Amazon. Like, great, you know?
I mean, look at the list of accomplishments, David. Like TED, and 2 books, and like all those. You put them all out one after the other. I mean, it's tempting to say these are my achievements, right? It's tempting to kind of put it out there, like, or actually even worse, someone else putting it out there, and you kind of looking at that and going, I wonder whether I'm leaving money on the table. And the reason I'm asking this question is very, very selfish, right? It's a selfish conundrum that I face in my head all the time, because for the longest time at Amplify, we did not take the clients who kind of went, hey, I have an idea for a show. I need you to produce it. And we're going, no, thank you. We need to be part of the whole process, because what's going to happen is you're going to ask us for ROI at the end and we won't have an answer for you. So we never took those people. But we lose money on those people because that's the innovation bit. And we spend all this time and effort and curate and build a team and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like, I don't know, as a business owner, my job is to actually, raise profit and grow the team. I don't know. So that's the question, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, so your first question was, do I ever wonder if I'm leaving money on the table? No, I don't wonder. I am 100% sure that I leave money on the table. Right? 100% sure. If I didn't want to do that, then I would have built out an online course for every single book that I have. And then I would have a day-long rally the troops event once a year based on sort of those themes of the book, where other big celebrity people would come in, and then at that we would sell a high ticket mastermind. I know the people that do that, right? I've written about some of them. I'm just not interested in that, right? And to your point about, as a business owner, You have a responsibility for profit. You don't have a responsibility for more profit. The beautiful thing about this life that we call entrepreneurship is you get to decide how big or small your business is. And, when you've got employees, yes, you got a responsibility to make payroll, but that's it. And you can have less employees. I have one part-time assistant. I love her. When I was a full-time business school student, she was a student of mine, and then she did freelance projects. And now she's part-time, and I split her with two other guys that do what I do. And it's a wonderful life for her, and it's great for me. Don't get me wrong. I get paranoid about I got to make sure I'm making enough money to pay her. But beyond that, no, I don't have a responsibility to that. I have a set number of gigs I want to do every year. I will say I've got a goal for a set number of books I want to sell every year, and I've never hit it. So that, from a growth perspective, that's what I've been looking on. But the dollar amount is not actually all that much. It's much more about just knowing kind of the people. But that's because I've optimized it in such a way that that's the max I want to support. Because you're always going to leave money on the table. You know what I really want to make sure that I don't leave on the table is time, right? I only have so much of that. And I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I'm a speaker who doesn't like being on planes and being away from them, right? So what I'm trying to do is say, what's the right amount where we've got this comfortable life? I know I'm making an impact. I know I'm helping people. And I know other people are getting booked way more often. And I know other people are selling books way more often, but I still get to be a superhero to those two. And I got 11 more years with one of them, right? And I got 13 with the other. If at the end of that, I decide to sort of scale up and whatever, great. I bet you I won't, because I'm hoping I'll still have that wife. And if I play my cards right and keep time, I'll still have the wife for whom did most of the work of those kids. And now I'll enjoy time with her. Right. And those are the things that I'll look back on and go, great. So what is my responsibility? I don't have a responsibility to make more profit. I have a responsibility to make enough profit. And that's a very different mindset that I don't think a lot of the Instagram entrepreneurs have.
So how did you get there, David? Because I'm keen to understand that, because it's not. So here's the thing, right? I mean, what you're saying, I'm picking up everything you're putting down, and I totally relate 100%. I know for a fact that we've run events just for the love of doing the event, purely lost money in the process, just gonna kind of go, oh, that would be a cool thing to put together, and no regrets about it at all. And I love that part. It's just, I suppose, how do you get to a point where you're comfortable with the way just being you, I suppose? Because we're always pulled and pushed into these different sort of molds of, being an entrepreneur. And you have a really nice sort of life, and everyone has this different version of what an entrepreneur is. It's either cutthroat, or she's has great success but no family, or she has these kind of awards, or he's written this book, and that's what an entrepreneur is. But you can build your own life and you're still an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I mean, the short version of how I got there is I had all sorts of delusions of grandeur, and then I didn't hit them, and I realized that my family loved me anyway. Right? That's the short version. I mean, I've had 3 books now, and each one has had, I promise you, I've put in the same amount of work into writing it, the same amount of creativity into writing it. I've gotten a little incrementally better each time. So the newest ones are always sort of a better read. Put the same amount of hours in terms of promotion and media and that kind of stuff, and had vastly different results, because I can't predict what the market likes, right? I can have an inkling of what some people need, but I can't predict. It's a roll of the dice. I mean, my grand theory with this sort of thinker business model is that the max you could probably do is say 10 to 20,000 copies. I know I have this many people that like my work that I can guarantee. Beyond that, it's whether or not some weird mix of factors clicks in place and you go viral and go beyond that, right? Maybe other people's number are a bit higher, but I don't think anybody's number is very large. That's just a built-in guaranteed this will buy it, right? So when you have those vast swings, you have 2 choices, basically. You can be manic depressive and get super excited and think that it's because the world loves you when you're succeeding, and be super depressed when you're not. Or you can realize that there are factors I control and factors I don't. And my job is to just focus on the factors that I control and let the rest go. And when you let the rest go, you realize, like, for one thing, you have to bring your identity, you have to draw your identity from more than that. Like the entrepreneurs that are working 80, 90, 100 hours a week, many of them are doing it because their whole identity is wrapped up in that thing that they're doing. I've had a pretty good run, right? So I've given a TED Talks, 2 million views. I was number 48 out of 50 actually sounds depressive. And like the number of business thinkers in the world, right? Or the ranking of it. 3 books, a couple bestsellers. Got some of them. I have like a medal somewhere over here from one of them. I don't, like, that's cool. And it'd be really easy to draw identity from that. But then when these ebbs and flows comes, you end up manic depressive. So the thing that I sort of flipped that first time we had the really big bucket or the really big drop and I was in the bucket, I was going, man, this sucks, right? Why does this suck? Like, why am I miserable? I'm getting emails from people that say that, oh, your book helped me with this and this and this. And I'm getting invitations to speak, but they're not as many as before. And I'm still miserable. Why? Well, usually because I'm comparing myself to one of the Instagram highlight reels of somebody else who scaled that whole thing. And he or her is drawing their whole identity from that. And that was sort of what I realized, like, all right, I have 2 choices. I can work 100 hours a week and try and be that bigger brand, or I can go, all right, I'm going to need to draw satisfaction from other areas of my life. And the thing that I found is that, like, that's better, right? Ryan Holiday, our mutual friend, has this great thing about comparison traps and the idea that if you look at somebody else and you go, oh, I really want their success here, like, it's only appropriate to do that if you would be willing to trade your whole life for their whole life, right? So how then do you win against every comparison trap? You build a well-rounded life to where you'd go, yes, it'd be really cool to be that New York Times bestselling author who has 10 million views on his TED Talk. And everybody's always inviting him somewhere. And he's got the perfect accent and the perfect black rim glasses. And you can probably picture who I'm talking about. I won't name him. It'd be perfect. But you know what? It would suck to be 50 and single. That would suck. So I'm not willing to do that, right? And I think the same thing with a lot of the entrepreneurs that have other business models that are thinking, oh, am I leaving money on the table? Like, maybe, but at least I get to share that table with people I love instead of like reheat a meal and eat it over the sink.
Wow. Mic drop there, brother. Like, I wonder, how often people get a chance to hear you get on a soapbox, because it's really, really beautiful.
I probably don't rant as much as I should, but I occasionally do those little daily Burke everyday videos, and sometimes they're a rant. I just recorded one that was a rant about another mutual friend of ours who was disappointed, and I was then yelling at him because I said, "Why would you set a goal where someone else determines whether or not you hit it?" Right. And so then I went on a whole other rant about that, but I think you saw it, so I'll just leave it there.
Right. That makes total sense. Like, I think you hit on a few points there, including definitions of success. And a lot of the times those definitions have been given to us, or we've adopted them for some reason. We don't even know why. How, in your opinion, like, 2 young kids, I'm super curious, like, how do you develop in their heads their definitions of success?
Yeah. I don't know.
I literally thought of that question right now. Like,
No. I mean, it's not that I've never thought of it. It's that I don't know if I'm doing it right. I know what I'm trying, right? Which is the number one thing I'm trying to instill in both of those kids is a growth mindset. An idea that like literally, earlier today, my son's gotten into this thing where, so backstory. So for the last 13 years, my hobby has been Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been doing it for 13 years. I love it. It's the only, I think any other form of exercise is boring, right? But one of the things that it instills in you is that growth mindset that you get better over time, right? And both of my kids have started it. My 7-year-old has started to make the connections between that art, and wrestling is the same way, or MMA. Most of these sort of combat sports are a lot. You'll hear people describe them as sort of human chess, or in boxing, they say the sweet science, which I don't understand because there's no science there, but whatever. And they talk about the strategy and the responses and the point counterpoints and all of that kind of stuff. And so I've been talking and we kept using the term chess. So he decided he wanted to learn chess, right? So today we sat down at the table and I taught him how to play chess, right? And I demolished him, not because I'm good at chess, but because I'm a grown man and he's 7, right? And so he starts crying and I'm like, dude, why are you crying? He goes, because I lost and it was my first time. And I said, yeah, everyone loses on their first time. And he kind of looked at me like, huh? And therein is the growth mindset lesson, right? Like everybody loses their first time, right? And that's okay because the whole point is you lose and learn, right? So that's that more than anything else. I mean, I don't have life outcome goals for them other than like they're not in prison and they haven't gotten someone pregnant, before 21. Or not in prison ever, but the other thing, right? Those are the only outcome goals I have. What I care about is whether or not we've instilled that sort of growth mindset that you're going to try things, you're going to fail, and that's part of the process. And so and it's the same as what we were talking about before with a business, right? There, your ebbs and flows are not attached to your successes and failures because a lot of times you don't control those. Your successes and your happiness, your satisfaction is tied to your income, your inputs. I almost said, did I say income? Scratch that. Your success, your satisfaction is tied to your inputs. What did you actually put in? And if you don't get the result you wanted, as long as you learn, that's still an acceptable result. That's that growth mindset. That's what we're trying to learn. I hope that also turns them into millionaires. But like if they end up teaching skiing and living in like a little shack on the side of a mountain, whatever, like I'll still be happy. Right. Again, as long as they're not in prison. So, that's it.
Yeah.
And by the way, I have nothing against the prison community. They probably have more of a growth mindset afterwards. I'm just saying, like, I think everyone would be in agreement that it's better not to end up in one than to end up in one and learn the lesson.
I remembered a Chris Rock bit where he says, "My only job in life is to keep my daughter off the pole," and it's a great goal, I suppose. I kind of really want to talk about network because I think network has gotten this bad rep. Like, I suppose entrepreneurship, it's like the sleazy person that's going to networking quote unquote events just to get more sales seems to be the definition everyone's gravitating towards, even though it actually isn't. How do you feel?
No, we have a different side of the same coin here. We were talking about before, we were joking about Facebook ads to a conversion page. And as long as I'm spending 50 to make 100, unfortunately, like networking got sullied by sales reps and job hunters, both of whom you could smell the desperation on. I get it. Your success and failure is still going to come through your network. But somewhere along the line, a lot of people started thinking that it was just a numbers game, that if I meet a certain number of people, a certain percentage of them will be able to help me, and then I'll be able to leverage that. And so the name of the game then, networking, becomes running up the score. How many connections do you have on LinkedIn? How many people did you meet at that networking event, et cetera? And the thing that I always try and get people to realize is that networking is not about meeting strangers. Where I come from is I had this desire to attack this issue from the standpoint of the science of human social networks, how humans are connected to each other. And the big mindset shift I had when I was doing all that research is that there's more to it than meeting strangers. Networking is not about running up the score. And in fact, I go so far as to say you can't grow your network, build your network, improve your network. I hate when we use those terms because you can't grow your network. You don't have a network. It's not yours to own. You exist inside of one, right? There's one large one, 7.4 billion people strong and counting. And then there's the sort of smaller branches of it that are your community that you're in, your group of entrepreneurs that you're in, et cetera. And it works best for you when you decide that your goal is to figure out how to navigate that network properly, figure out how to nurture those connections you already have, make new ones, yes, but like within this context that it's about making the whole community stronger. Then you win much more successfully than if you're just trying to add to the contacts app on your phone and then spam everybody and hope some of them want to buy insurance.
Right. And I think was that the motivation for Friend of a Friend? Was that the motivation to kind of
Yes.
to write
that's that sort of initial motivation. And then what we do in that book is unpack, here are the different principles of how networks work. Some of them you've probably heard before, like what's the story with 6 degrees of separation? What's the deal with strength of weak ties, those sort of things. But the idea was like, this is not a textbook on how to give an elevator pitch. This is a textbook on here's how the community that you're in is working. Now you go figure out what you need to do. Now that you can analyze where you are in this community, you can figure out where you want to be, who you want to be connected to, where your blind spots are. Now you go make a plan to figure out what actions you have to take. But my goal was to say, look, this whole approach of like, just run up the score. And so do these things and you'll meet more people. That's the wrong approach. You already exist inside of a network. Let's learn how that network works so that you can move forward. And in fact, How Networks Work was the original terrible title of the book.
But it totally makes sense, right? How networks work. I mean, when you think about
it would have ended up in like a computing section of the bookstore, so that would have been awful.
That's crazy because I can totally see that too. What you covered there and how you explain network, even though I've heard you say that before, that's the first time it actually sat differently with me, because it's like really interesting, because all this while I kind of thought, like everyone else, I suppose, that I had a network, as opposed to belonging to a network. And that's very, very, very different way of thinking. How did you arrive there? I mean, it's like, it's so simple, but like, how did you get there?
Well, I mean, you start, so the biggest thing, so one of the principles of network science is this idea of a structural whole, right? Not to get too nerdy, but a structural whole is a gap in the network that's produced because people cluster to people who are similar to them, right? And so one of the big areas in the context of entrepreneurship that I saw was, you can only hear people say so many times that like one of the great things about partnering with a VC firm is not the money. You know, the money's great, but it's the other connections that they have access to that you don't have access to. So really what you want out of that firm is, yes, money, but you also want to plug the structural hole that's in your network. So now you're connected to those people, right? Technically you could do the hard work of trying to run up the score of the number of people you meet, and 1 out of 100 of them are going to be that person that you know. But it's a whole lot easier to go friend of a friend, right? To go, I'm connected to this person and now they're sort of connected to that. You only get that when you survey the whole landscape. When you're just doing the other one, you're basically just putting a lot of work in and praying to the gods of serendipity. And they are cruel, cruel gods. So it's a whole lot easier to just figure out that network, figure out where your structural holes are, for example, what communities you need to be connected to, and put a plan together. You get a way better return on energy when you do that. So that was sort of the start of it. And then, I mean, again, there was this broader sort of distaste with the same people that are running around taking selfies on private jets are the same people that are running around boasting about how many people they know, as if that is the sign of their success in terms of networking. That's not, how many people you know is not the sign of whether or not you're a good networker. Whether or not you know someone for every problem you could face is the sign of whether or not you're a good networker. And some of those people that have 10,000 connections on LinkedIn are still struggling to find the right person for the right situation. And people with what they would think of as much smaller networks at least always know who they could ask, or who they could ask for an introduction from to get connected to that resource that they need. That's a way more powerful network. And it's not because it's size, it's because of its interconnectivity and its ability to plug those structural holes.
Oh, mate, that's you know, I love how you encapsulate some concepts that I suppose everyone else thinks about entirely differently. Ladies and gentlemen, davidburkus.com is where you go to check out all the cool stuff he's up to. But when you think about legacy, do you think about legacy? Do you think enough time and distance everyone's forgotten, or do you think you know, I would like to be remembered like this? How does that go down?
Yeah, I mean, not to be cavalier, but there are 3 people, and they're currently in the same building with me, whose opinion of my legacy I actually care about, right? And if those 3 people are crying at my funeral, which is a really strong test, maybe they'll be in shock and maybe they won't, and nobody else cares, that's fine, right? I mean, yes, obviously I would prefer for it to be at Madison Square Garden because everyone loved that book that I wrote that I don't even know what it is yet because I don't have an idea that would be that popular. That'd be better, right? But I'm not worried about it. I mean, my goal in interactions, one of the things I always say is that my goal in interactions, whether it's writing, putting out an article, speaking from the stage, is I'm trying to help people do their best work ever. And so when people think of me, if they think of that, like you made me think about things in a way that helped me do my best work ever. You gave me this tactic and that helped me do it. That would be great too. But truthfully, to go back to that whole idea about satisfaction, identity, and whatever, that's a secondary goal. That first one is that first piece, and those three people's opinion matters way more. And I guess I'm hoping I live long enough to get grandkids, so maybe they'll be like 7 by the time I actually do die.
I love how you have that number in your head as well. The number 7.
I mean, this is just math. We stopped at 2. If both of them have 2, that adds 4 grandkids to the third. So that's 7. That's
a little bit of thinking, man. That's quite a bit of thinking there. I have to say, like, I mean, for someone who doesn't have kids, I that's something I haven't thought about yet. You know, grandkids, Jesus.
Well, I should tell you. So I'm one of 3 kids, and we're the only. I actually got married first. I'm the youngest in my family. I got married first. And I'm the only one to have had kids, and the other 2 don't actually have spouses anymore either. And again, I mean, candidly, part of the reason is that balance piece. So we could have unpacked that whole thing, but that would have taken too long, and I haven't talked to them about that. So let's not go too far down that road. But that, you know, so I get you on the math thing, right? I'm making the assumption that both of my kids are going to have the same number of kids that I do, and I already know that's not the case because I can look at my own family unit for that. So maybe 7 is actually too big of a number. Who knows?
No, but it's kind of like really interesting, the thought processes that we go through and we have in our heads and how they come and how they get there. I'm super curious with all the experience that you bring to today. I'm super curious, like, what is the question that people should be asking but they're not?
Oh, what is the question that people are asking that they should be not? You know, so I guess I could think about it in this context. We live in a time where it seems like the campaign du jour is to throw everything about the old ways out and say, oh, we're going to change this, we're going to disrupt this. And you know, in some social context, I don't want to get political, but in some social context, you'll see the old ways described as bigoted, right, or sexist, whatever. And maybe they are, but the point is this idea that, like, now because we're smarter, right, we can throw all of that up. I don't know that that's all useful. I think we actually have to go back and go, what from that worked? G.K. Chesterton, the English writer, brilliant dude, could literally write like 2 novels at once in 2 different hands, right? Like, brilliant dude. And he always said that he gets worried when people are quick to eschew tradition because tradition is the democracy of the dead. In other words, if the dead had a current vote on our existing social, like how we're doing things, the traditions they handed down would be how they voted. And I think we need to take that into consideration. And one of the things, I mean, I'm seeing this, the reason all of this is coming to my head is I'm writing this book, Friend of a Friend, and it's about social networks. And of course, everyone is then saying, oh yeah, well, what do you think of LinkedIn? What do you think of Instagram? What do you think of whatever? And I don't think anything of them because they turn out to be crap tools. Our ancestors knew something way better, that like, you're happier when you only know 100 people, but you know them intimately, right? Those old villages that everybody used to know and everybody knew everybody's business. It seems so opposite of the big city life of 11 million people, never sleeps. It's so exciting. And like, but are you happier? That's a good point. Maybe I'm not, right? And so I think most of us need to do that. I don't know that we need to do it societally as one big question, but I think each one of us need to go, okay, what things from the past, what traditions did I throw out on the front lawn that maybe I need to go back and say, come on back into the house. You may actually have worked out pretty well.
Yeah, well, it's true, right? I mean, when you think about that closed networked community that everyone knew everything and everyone else's business, what we call gossip, I suppose. Now everyone is following Dancing with the Stars or whatever is popular on TV as gossip, right? But it's the same sort of effect, right? We still feel like we're part of this community because we're following the same sort of gossip, but it's so disconnected because we don't actually know the person. And then we have, I suppose, this separation of identity because everyone only puts the good stuff out there. I'm super curious around friend of a friend, because I mean, I came to Australia 22 years ago from India. My mom's got a Portuguese passport. My dad's got an Indian one. I've got an Australian one. Like my wife's parents are from Austria. It's like fucking all over the place, right? So my question is, friend of a friend, how important, how does culture fit into all this? Because, you know, growing up, there are different patterns that people are brought up in. How does that affect it, or does it affect it at all?
So most of the book is built around insights from network science, which is the study of how people connect to each other. And that turns out to be universally true. The difference is then how you execute on it, right? So you know, making an introduction, right? So in the US, for example, making an introduction is like, nah, you know, it's the one-off. I'll send you a text and say, hey, you really need to meet this guy, and you guys will get connected in there. There are other cultures where the idea that you're making an introduction and you're vouching for that person and you're spending your reputation on that person, et cetera, are much deeper, right? The connection piece is still there. And that's all friend of a friend dives into, is that who's connected to whom and who's 1 or 2 degrees of separation out. But executing on that is something that I think it does vary by culture. And that's one of the reasons we tried not to get too prescriptive into like, here's what to do. Like I'm really not a fan of the, here's the perfect way to give an elevator pitch, because again, that's cultural. Right. In a lot of cases, like a lot of Asian cultures, you don't give an elevator pitch because you're going to meet them 4 or 5 times before you're even talking about what you do. Right. So those things, but I see those as sort of the execution piece, not the strategy piece. And the strategy piece is informed by network science, and that doesn't change. But how you choose it. And that, again, that's why we don't get too prescriptive. The idea is to understand the network you're in, and then hopefully you know enough about the culture you're in to develop that plan.
Right. Well, I think that's so interesting. I mean, because I mean, I've never run a global company before, and now we have team in so many different parts of the world. Like it's so different to get used to what works for them and what sort of ideas they have around success. And even here in Australia, I suppose everyone has a different version of what success in an agency looks like. So I was super curious around that.
I'll give you, I'm an academic at heart. So there's always a book recommendation, but there's a brilliant woman by the name of Erin Meyer. She's an American, but she's at INSEAD, which is a French business school. And she has this book called The Culture Map, which is essentially an updated version of like the Hofstede cultural dimensions and those ideas, but it's specifically written in a business context of like, here's what you need to understand. But basically every culture, it's sort of to an XY axis kind of grid. And then every country culture can be sort of graphed somewhere on that. And then it helps you get kind of the quick and dirty about what's different about working with this culture. So, I mean, even if, you know, you're in a situation where you probably wouldn't call what you do a multinational corporation, but it kind of is, because you've got assistants working over here, or maybe you're distressed. So, you know, all of us are in international business in some capacity right off the bat, right? So all of us can kind of benefit from that. It's a brilliant, brilliant book. Candidly, I hate saying that because one time Erin and I were both up for an award and she won, and that means that I lost, but her book is worth it. So I'm okay with the fact that it beat one of mine.
That's so funny. I've actually, someone has mentioned Culture Map to me before. It's not the first time I'm hearing it. I actually am going to go and get it on Audible. What's coming up, dude? What are you excited about for the year? I know we're going to hang out in Los Cabos soon, and that's going to be cool. What else is cool?
That will be cool. So I'm working on a project now that I don't want to call a book, but I'm writing it. I don't know if it's going to turn into an audio program, if it's going to be a talk, if it's going to be a physical book, or what it's going to be. But it's based on the idea that, especially, I mean, for entrepreneurs, for businesses, and we could riff on this for too long, maybe we shouldn't. But that idea that I was talking about before about really getting crystallized who you help and why. The terminology that I use a lot of times is sort of like, what battle are you fighting? And it's not yours a lot of times. It's what is your customer what battle are they fighting that you can come alongside and help, right? So it's kind of similar to, like, Don Miller has this great book called Story Brand, which is about what is the story that your company is telling, and the customer is always the hero. Like, that's great. I think he missed some of the research on human behavior in the service of a really simplistic concept. So I'm going to try and get a little more true to the science while still being easy to remember. I don't know if that's going to work, or if I'm going to, like, drag the file into my recycle bin at the end of the summer and say, forget about it. But that's what's been occupying a lot of my thoughts, has been that I don't think it's enough to say, oh, we offer this product at this great price anymore. And I don't even think it's enough to tell that sort of compelling aspirational story. If you look at the culture of sort of business today, I think you've got to say either who are you helping, or what are you fighting for that someone is helping you fight by buying your product, right? I think it's got to be one of those two things, and how people do that and how they execute it. I'm still in the early phases, which is why this sounds also rough, but that's what I'm looking for, is that sort of battles that we're all fighting type of thing.
Well, I was listening to it earlier when you were talking about, initially started talking about it, and I had goosebumps because it is so apt for the moment. I feel like I love the customer journey, that or the customer is the hero and you're just the guide part, and I love how that whole framework works, and I love the fact that you saw the whole of behavior that's missing in their human behavior, and I suppose it'd be super exciting to check out what you come out with. I love the creative process, and I think you love it more, and execute it more than I do, and I have a feeling like I should do more of that kind of stuff. Just talking to you.
I mean, maybe you should. I will tell you, my favorite part of the creative process is the research part, is the just learning as much as I possibly can about stuff. I have yet to figure out a way to get paid just to do that. So I usually then have to synthesize it and turn it into something useful for people so it can help them, which is also fine. But like the more exciting part is that, and that's the stage that I'm in right now, is that I have all of these ideas and I've got to sort of shh them down. So it's hard to concisely say, this is the next project. But that's what I've been looking at and studying in the past couple months. And actually, candidly, the idea actually came out of talking to a couple different entrepreneurs from MMT in Park City. So I'm hoping I've got the idea crystallized before we go back and you and I are hanging out in Cabo, so that I can go like, boom, here's what I got. What do you think? And then if it resonates with them, then I know I've got something that I should take and actually turn into some sort of work, again, whether it be a book, a podcast, an audio project, just a keynote speech. I mean, I'm a big fan of, I sort of feel like I started as a writer first and then turned into a speaker. And then I met our mutual friend, Joey Coleman, who's like perfected this one talk. And now it's a book, but first it was just a talk. Maybe I should go that route. I don't know. I'm looking into a bunch of that stuff, but first I got to get that idea crystallized.
Yeah. Well, we've done an audio documentary for a naturopath on gut health. That's really doing extremely well for her. It's only been a month and a bit that has gone out, and it's a audio documentary. So it's like not like I'm Not Your Guru, like Tony Robbins sort of thing, but longer and audio only. So you kind of in the imagination, and she's interviewed like 25 people that are experts in the field, and it's quite interesting. For me it was one of the the creative bits that took 2.5 years to find the right client, the right people to bring together this project. So I'm excited to see what you come up with, man. Ladies and gentlemen, davidburkus.com, burkus.com. Links will be in the show notes. Dude, this has been awesome. I feel we can keep going. I think what I would love to do is do one of these in person, because I think that would be super awesome.
We should. I mean, are you going to bring your ATR 2100 to Cabo? Or no, that's actually got an XLR cord on it. What is that microphone? And by the way, because you'll need this clip, thank you so much for having me. All right, now we can go back to the actual. Because I know you're going to need to edit all the geek talk that we're about to go into out. But yeah.
This is a Shure SM58, just a normal.
Okay. I said that because of the shape, and then I noticed that it's a thicker cable, so it's got to be something better than that.
Yeah. So it picks up less. I've got a main road. This is a new office we've moved into. We're building studios downstairs. And with any other microphone, I'd get like the background noise would be crazy. But only because of this one, it sort of cuts that out.
Yeah, no, you sound good. I've got that Yeti Blue that everybody used to tell you to get, and now everyone's like, no, don't get that. But like when I got it 5 years ago, it was the best thing that could plug right into your computer. And now everyone's like, oh, what is this? This is a condenser mic, and those are terrible. And you're supposed to have a shotgun mic now if you're podcasting, whatever. But I've learned I can play around with the gain and get really good sound out of it. So
yeah, if there's nothing in your background, then 100%. I mean, anything like a microphone works. These just help with other stuff. Yeah.
So this is what I'm really curious by, and let's not put this in the recording.
Okay.
But what do you do with an audio documentary at the end? Do you seed it out as a podcast? Do you try and like put it on Audible as a book, like an audio book? What's the end way to get it out in the world?
Well, for her, we put out a podcast. So it's like a season, like how. So for her, season 1's gut health, season 2 is mental health. We've got 5 seasons planned, and for what we did for her in particular was, so she hadn't written like the stuff that you've kind of gone and doing literature review. So her literature review was, we found the 25 leading people in gut health that she needed to have long conversations with, and we booked her that, and she went around the US and London and all that kind of places and spoke to the who's who in gut health, which we took and then put it together into an audio documentary, and then she narrated it, and then we put sound design on top of that, and now it's released as that. But what we've also done in there is created a whole sales funnel for her, which she actually started getting sales in week 2 or something from it being released, which was quite unusual. I mean, it takes a longer time for someone to buy stuff off a podcast. But for her, I think because of the way it was curated, I think they got there a bit quicker. So I don't know whether that makes sense. So we have different ways.
No, totally. No, so candidly, the reason I'm asking is that as I started working on this project, one of the things that became apparent really, really early is that it won't take 60,000 words to lay out the idea, right? Which essentially means that a book is probably not the best format, right? If it is, it's going to be one of the little thin books, and then you get into all sorts of kind of cost issues and some stuff that normally I don't have to think about. Like where my life, I'm not self-publishing. Where my life is I'm trying to convince a publisher to give me a 6-figure chunk of money to do the book. Well, one of the first things that they demand is that it be thick enough to justify a price that justifies your advance, all of that sort of stuff. So I started thinking about it as, what if it were just an audio book, similar to like Adam Grant, the writer, just did a thing with Audible that was, I mean, really it was like a 4-hour long podcast, right? It was mostly his narration, some interviews mixed in, and some sound design. But it was a podcast, throw it up on Audible, charge $10 for it, et cetera, so that's probably where I'm thinking with this piece. In fact, I've started to have conversations with my agent about, like, if it's just audio, we can't sell it to my publisher. Can we try and sell it right to Audible? What do you want to do with this? I don't know where we are on that, but that's why I was asking is I feel like what's weird is I feel like everybody is going right to the podcast model. And unless you do what you did, like, I think Jordan Harbinger is the smartest guy in podcasting, mostly because they defaulted into that whole system of selling a training on the back end, where everybody else was like, let's make money with the ads, right? So it's cool to hear you say that on the podcast side, as you can have something on the back end on that. But I also feel like a lot of people who are doing good things in audio are ignoring the idea that maybe it's audio people would pay for just that, not, the free podcast thing. Does that make sense?
100%. So what we do is actually build podcast or voice for brands, so for businesses. So for in her case, she's got a whole product ecosystem at the back end of that. She's got a whole clinic with like 12 practitioners, and she's been operating for like 8 years, and she's at a different business. So for her, putting it on a pot, like putting it in a space that is free and it's so well done, like easily we could have put that on Audible at like $25 easily. So you listen to it, like it's called The Shift by Catherine Maslin. You don't have to listen to the whole thing, but you understand what we're talking about because it is so well done. And we also are the only agency in Australia that has partnered with Amazon actually 2 years ago, and we've got a 10-year deal with them. So there's something that they've been pushing us to do is do an Audible original. But I have, so for me, so they wanted me to do the Audible original for them, and they were going to give me a six-figure piece of money. But I said to them, that doesn't make sense, because if I go to a business owner like Catherine, for example, and say to her, I'm going to build this asset for you, which you can put across every single platform, she'll give me way more than the $100,000 or whatever, $150,000 or that you
Yeah, no, it only makes sense if you've got the sort of micro one person business that I have, right? If you've got a larger clinic, the ROI is not there. Yeah, it makes sense.
But for you, the way you're thinking about it is like next level. I think the biggest problem with audiobooks, and we have the Library of Sound. So Amplify has our own audiobook arm, which is called the Library of Sound. The biggest problem for us, and we see it a lot, is that audiobooks in its current state, people are narrating at you. Like the author or whoever is narrating is just narrating at you. And you're just like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's literally, and that's been the interesting thing about sketching this out, is it's literally just narrating the written book. But if you're writing for it to just be heard, it's a different writing. You write in longer pauses for people to consider stuff. I mean, I think if I went the audio route, I don't think it would sound full on podcast, because a lot of the podcasts are still very interview based. Like one person's voice versus another is still sort of 50-50. What I think would be cool would be to still do it narration storytelling, but without me, with like not me reading quotes. The quotes are their voice that we captured, but it's not a full interview the way like an episode of Freakonomics or This American Life sounds like. Like somewhere between that, the sort of audio documentary sound and the narrating at you sound, somewhere in that middle. Have you ever listened to, it'd probably be really similar to, Steven Johnson does this awesome show now called American Innovations that Wondery does with him. And it's, Steven Johnson's a super famous like science and innovation writer in the US at least. And it's mostly his narration, but it's sound design behind it. It's actually him reading the quotes, but what they do is they basically record the whole thing in stereo, and the quotes are always lefty or righty or back and forth. So you get like still a feeling of being in it, even though it's all him, right? And then that got me thinking about like, man, it's actually relatively simple to create something that's a little bit more immersive than just somebody reading in monotone the whole book, right? So yeah.
Sure. I mean, I don't know how easy it is to create something more immersive. I mean, I feel like it's a very different tact, because when we're taught to write differently, I suppose. You're taught to write. But I think even if you listen to the promo of The Shift, or even like, first 15 minutes of episode 1, you'll see I think it's what you're talking about, in terms of it's not all the way Freakonomics, but it's also not all the way Dan Carlin, where he's just reciting like at you. It's like in between with this sound design. So here's what
it's Catherine Maslin, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Cool.
But I think here's what I do think. I think the same body of work, just changed slightly, can be produced as an audiobook version immersively, as a consumable, or like a really nicely produced audiobook, as well as in a different, like written book, paperback, different way.
Yeah. So my thinking, and yeah, I say when I say easy, it's not easy to write a script instead of a book. But if you start with the script, it's easy to go to the book, if that makes sense. Like it'd be if you're planning for audio first, it's easy to create something that's immersive, and then you take sort of the transcript of that, and there's not a lot of tweaks. It will not look like a normal book. It'll probably look like lots more. It'll look like something in between a book and poetry, right? In the way that it's formatted on the page. But there are authors who excel in that sort of style. So yeah. But I mean, it's also the cool thing for me is that you don't even have to think about the print, the way the world's going with Audible originals, and now Spotify wants to get into audiobooks, and most of the audiobook publishers like Recorded Books, et cetera, are buying content now because they realize they can't just rely on the big five publishers handing them deals to produce an audio thing for them. They've got to produce original content. What that's creating, at least in what I'm seeing in the market, is sort of this gravitas for what would not be a fully formed enough idea for a book, right? Like a book is an LP. These can be an EP. This is a cool idea, but it's not a big idea. It's just a small, cool idea. And now there's a place with enough gravitas to get it out there, whereas before there wasn't. Your best thing was like a Medium article that you hope goes viral and you make no money on, you know?
Sure. But yeah, I mean, I know Audible are looking, so I know for sure that Audible want more Audible originals for the right sort of idea. The thing that I don't have the patience for to deal with Audible about is they have only one way that they do certain things. So if someone has an idea, you present the pitch, you kind of do that. There's only one way. I'm looking for innovation. So with Catherine, it was entirely like she trusted us or me entirely on the whole thing, and it came out entirely differently. So maybe now I might sort of see if I can, I don't know, get a pitch together, because they've been pushing at us for like the last couple of years to do an Audible original, and they would put like a lot of resources behind it. But I never really.
No, again, what they want is a script that somebody can just read, and then boom, that's their thing. Yeah, I mean, do you have an Audible account?
I have an Audible account, yeah.
Okay, well, go get Adam Grant's thing, Power Moves, and listen to it. And really, some of it is a cash grab because he used interviews he already had from like people he hosted at Wharton or when he did a panel at Davos and that sort of thing. But it's the way they produce it. It sounds like a Gimlet production or a This American Life or whatever, but it's an Audible original. So it sounds like that hybrid, which was the first time I'd ever heard them do that. And that was the big light bulb for me. It was like, oh, you are interested in more than just narration of an existing text. And that's what got me, because that's what it would have to be. If it's narration of existing text, then it might as well be a book, just a tiny little Seth Godin, the Dip style book, but it might as well be a book. If it's more immersive, then it should be, you know. So that's the other thing that's good running around in my head is not only what's the idea, but what's the right way to ship the idea, because it's different this time. And candidly, that's really fun. As somebody who's done the book writing thing 3 times in a row,
yeah,
the new area is very fun.
Audio, I'm so glad I got into this when I did, because we're literally, dude, we're the first audio marketing agency in the world. That's crazy, right? So we're partnering now with like, you know, Hollywood and fucking Vayner Media, and so all Vayner clients who need audio done come through Amplify. And it's only because we've been going for that long, since the beginning, and a lot has changed. Audio, suddenly every Tom, Dick, and Harry is getting into audio. But you just see the consumption rates. I'm sure there's like reports out there of how quickly or how much people are consuming in audio versus any other format, and how quickly that's growing. I find that all really fascinating.
Yeah, no, totally. That's one of the other reasons I'm thinking about it. Maybe this thing is different. I mean, I've definitely taken notice of the fact that, like, friend of a friend, I didn't read the audiobook. We sold the rights and they were like, nah, we'd rather just use our cheap in-house guy. And normally what that means is it's done. But this time around, third book around, the number of people that are like, hey, I just finished listening to your audiobook. Not I just read your book. I just finished listening is arguably more than have read the ebook, right? Which is saying something. So yeah.
All right, man. Where are you? Where do you live?
Tulsa, Oklahoma, smack dab in the middle of the U.S.
Right.
Which I found out, similar to Joey and living in Denver, it's actually awesome when you're a speaker to live in the middle of the country because everywhere is a shorter flight.
Right.
So like if you live in New York and you have a gig in San Francisco, that's a 6-hour flight, and then you're going to take a red eye home. It's 2.5 hours for me. It's awesome.
That's crazy. Yeah, so I'm heading for a month. That way, September. Definitely will be in Boulder because I hung out with Philip a few times and we've become good friends. So I might.
Now he's a guy who the one last talk thing is really powerful, but you could do so much more with it with decent sound design and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
We're toying with another idea on that, but in the same vein of one last talk, but not one last talk.
Right. But like I listened to his thing. I'm like, yeah, this could be, or even like, Mel Robbins' last 2 Audible projects have been a cash grab where she just sits in a room and counsels people. And I listened to the first like 2 hours of her first one, and I was like, Philip could do so much better than this.
100%. Oh, fuck. I watched. Oh my god. I was in Boulder at the start of the year for his 2-day Brave Mind or Brave Soul or whatever.
Brave Heart, right?
Brave, yeah, one of those. Yeah. Where I interviewed him. I interviewed him before and after. Oh my, he's like next level. Like, yeah, scary. But yeah, it was good to be part of that. Dude, I'm gonna run. I'm gonna connect with you on Facebook so that we can be in touch. But I will let you know when I'm down that way.
Cool. Yeah. Let me know. Let me know what cities you're planning on being, and we'll see if something's close or if something lines up. Because I'm also like I'm here, but I'm also all over because that's the job. So yeah. And then regardless, we'll see you in Cabo in October, no matter what. So
yeah, I'm also super keen to talk to you about maybe coming to Australia. Maybe we can do something about getting you here.
Dude, I've been looking for an excuse to come to Australia for a while now.
So I've been bringing speakers here for the last 5 years. So
yeah, you do a conference that Jordan spoke at once, didn't he?
3 times. He speaks every year. He always comes back. I didn't think Jordan wanted to come back with the first year. I just thought he did me a favor. He came here. And then he said it on his show, and I was like, oh fuck! I should ask him again whether he wants to come back next year. He's come back 3 years now, and Jen, I actually put Jen on the stage last year on purpose, and I said, hey, you like, she's like, no. I'm like, you're going to be on a panel. You do so much more than Jordan's face does. Yeah, Jordan's spoken. Pat Flynn's been here. John Lee Dumas. Like a lot of the guys sort of come to We Are Podcast because it was the first conference in Australia on podcasting. So yeah, man, I'd be super keen to chat with you about doing something different. I'm looking to do a different event.
Yeah, no, we should. I have been in talks with this group for like 4 or 5 years called the Growth Faculty. And they're similar to Art of in Canada, which Jason is friends with, those organized. And basically their whole model is like book a theater that seats 1,000, grab big names, pay them to come over here because we know that we'll sell 1,000 tickets, and like, boom, we're profitable. And I've done like webinars for them and done little writings to let them use some of my content on their website, whatever. And without dropping the hint of like, one of their assumptions is always like, oh, well, it's on the other side of the world, so you're going to charge 3x like your domestic fee. And I've always tried to drop them the hints is like, just make an offer, because it's like, if it's profitable, it's my excuse. Like you haven't realized you'd be the first time, so we can give you a good deal. But they just make assumptions on that, so they've never been asked. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, Philip has already said yes. He's just waiting for me to give him dates, and but I'm super keen to chat about that. I'm trying to work out something different because I don't actually want to be pigeonholed as a podcast conference as well. So
Well, I would imagine for your agency, a broader entrepreneurship conference brings in more clients than does podcasters, because what you want is people like The Shift. Yeah.
Like I said, we've done stuff for the pure love of doing it, and that's purely why I ran the conference, was because there was no one here doing it, and it was like fucking super lonely. And at the time, I didn't have money to go to the ones in the States, so I kind of made one here.
I love that. I love that.
Dude, I gotta run. I'm gonna talk to you soon. We can chat always.
Cool. Well, we'll chat. We'll hook up on Facebook and we'll chat.